Welcome back. I've got Saskia and Neuner on the line. Saskia, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well. Looking forward to this conversation today. So, why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the conversation?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Saskia. I am the chief of staff of Seatti. Seatti is a German software company, and we're actually one of the leaders in the European market for workplace management. And we're based in Germany, but our team is completely distributed all across Europe. So me personally, I live in Spain, and yeah, happy to be on the call with you.
No, I'm really looking forward to this chat because the work that you're doing, and especially with the app and other arenas that you're getting involved into as well, is very timely for what the world is seeing. Where prior to the COVID pandemic, most people that were office based worked in an office. Yeah, they might work remotely occasionally, but pretty much everybody was at the office. Well, the pandemic, of course, changed that in many ways. And then post pandemic, a lot of organizations thought, well, we want to have something hybrid where we don't necessarily need to have such a big office for everybody because everybody's not in here at the same time. So we've got a lot of empty desks and things like that sitting around. So organizations, rightfully so, looked at maybe we buy or acquire a smaller space, but how do we leverage when a desk is available? So you're coming in and you're not going through five flights of, office space to find a desk, which is a case I've heard people complain about quite a bit, where it's like, yeah, I'm going into work today, but it was actually one of the big banks had that challenge where one of their agents or one of their office workers said, "Yep, I had to go into work where they call this back in to work out of office a few days a week. It took me 45 minutes to be able to find a desk." And it's like that is such a waste of productivity. So that's where your app could alleviate that. So why don't you share a little bit more about the app, what it does? What was the mindset? What was the mindset behind it? What gave you in your team the idea to build this?
So interestingly, we were found just before the pandemic started because we saw a tendency of companies to, yeah, tap into hybrid work, but it was oftentimes done, yeah, in a very, yeah, weird way or wrong way. It wasn't really lived fully. So what we did was we actually did a huge survey across the biggest company in Germany, and we asked them what it would take for them in order to really start living hybrid work without the fears that many yeah, leaders have in their mind that people are not working when they're at home, etc. And so they said, well, let's start with a simple, nice to use desk sharing tool because that would allow us to reduce office space, to share desks, and to coordinate when people are coming to the office. So this was the first feature we built. This was all pre-pandemic. We then grew quite organically and strongly over the pandemic, obviously, because many companies felt this shift to new workplace tendencies. And and nowadays we're a full-fledged workplace management software, and you can basically book all types of resources through Seatti. And since we, like, from the very beginning on, we always had this management perspective. Okay, what does it take to really make hybrid work? We also built features such as our yeah, social nudging and meetup features. So basically through our app, you can see who is where, when, and how can I meet up with them. So which are the relevant colleagues I want to meet when I come to the office? Where do I want to sit when I come to the office? Do I want to sit next to my colleagues, or do I want to sit far away from certain colleagues, maybe even? Do I need certain areas that are blocked for my entire team, or do I want everyone to mix up with everyone? Do I need a parking when I come to the office or not? Because we saw that in the end, once companies allow hybrid work in order to not cause a situation where everybody just stays at home the entire time, you need to incentivize people to come to the office in the right way. And that often functions through social triggers. So whether that's events that are happening in the office, certain colleagues that are in the office, um, that leadership meetings that are happening in the office. And so we wanted to make all of those things visible And at the same time, we wanted to reduce the frustrations that come with going to the office, because what happened during and also after the pandemic is people have, or companies have, reduced their office space, and people wanted to come to the office, and then they ended up not finding a parking space, not finding a desk, or not finding a desk that accommodated to their needs, such as, I don't know, a designer would need a certain screen when he or she would come to the office. And so we wanted to make all those things visible, and make it a nice experience to come to the office, something that felt easy and pre-planned, and kind of free of worries. And that was the main idea of Seatti, to really make hybrid work and to make it comfortable for all the involved parties.
Yeah, I, work out of my own location, but, it's like, I'm like, "How do I use this?" It's such an amazing, and as you were explaining all of these things that you thought of, and obviously I know you collaborated with companies too. I was thinking it does make it, uh, quite frankly, an experience, and a positive one, to go into the workplace, because instead of, "All right, I'm gonna go there," they'll sit somewhere where you can, much like when you're making a reservation, if you're going on a vacation, you're kind of picking, the buffet of items and going, okay, what do I need? What would I like? Who's in that day? Oh, I like them. I never get to work with them. Oh, that's cool. All right. Where is the spot next to them open? Cool. All right, great. We'll be able to collab on some other things that we've been working on. So it makes sense. Like, or you mentioned, okay, I need the big screen for a team presentation that we're going to be doing 2 or 3 times today, with different parts of the team, because the team is larger. We don't necessarily need to have the entire team on a floor, but for the presentation, we got to make sure that we have that room. Is that room available? Great. Okay, let's secure that. And what, again, that does is it eliminates the silos. It eliminates, you're waiting for something and you're like, okay, because every time you wait for something, then that's work not getting done. And that causes frustration. People are like, I could have done this at home. I had to come all the way in. Couldn't find a parking spot, couldn't use that room because it's booked up all week. And I walked by the room, 3 times today, and there's nobody in the room. Why is it booked right now when it's not there? Because people just say, I'm just gonna block it off in case I need to use it, which is not, appropriate, but people do that. These are, experiences that I had, when I worked in office places like that, I need to reserve the boardroom. Oh, no, it's not available because this group's in there, and you're like, they're not even in there. It's where are they? Oh, it's like, well, can I use the room? No, they might still need it. I'm like, okay. And then it just causes frustration. And then the whole idea of enticing and encouraging people to come back to the office space, again, you want to make it a pleasant experience, because if you make it, not pleasant at all that's going to do is just rise up the disengagement that they have about going in. And then when they're there, they're not happy. They're not good to work with. It just creates a dynamic where the workplace culture challenges that we see and hear about all the time, a big part of that is the work environment and where you're working and the equipment you have and access to things. That's just another, layer to all the challenges we're seeing a lot of organizations struggle with right now, especially those that were remote mostly, and then are now in the process of trying to get those people to come back full time or more often than not in the office, which is creating an interesting dynamic to say the least.
Mhm. Yeah, I fully agree. And especially the cultural aspect that you mentioned, I think it's one of the most complex topics when we think about new work, or like new working models that companies have these days. Because, yes, employees all over the world, they demand flexibility, and it's become a non-negotiable to provide flexibility to white collar workers all across the globe. But then what happens is, once the office experience becomes frustrating, for example, because whenever I come, it's too loud and there is no space for me, or whenever I come, there's nobody in the office, so there is no use of coming, people just stay at home the entire time. And what then happens is, it starts to affect culture very negatively. And I think what most companies need to understand is that in a hybrid setup, you need to motivate and also intrinsically engage employees to come back to the office and to really live that experience, because there are thousands of studies out there in the market that say productivity is at its peak when employees are coming together, when they're exchanging on even like non-professional topics, because this is when ideas spark. This is when a certain level of security between employees starts to build up. And so it is those interpersonal moments that are super relevant in order to maintain a successful culture that then translates in more productivity and revenue gains and success for companies. And I think what is more important than anything these days for companies is to really understand it's important to create this balance between, yes, we need to provide flexibility to our employees, but we also need to motivate to come to the office more frequently. And we need to make this motivation as comfortable as it can be, to make the office as the best experience the employee can have, because the moments that are created in the office or through social interactions are the moments that can really, trigger success in the end of the day.
Oh, of course, and it's, understanding that dynamic and the flexibility and working with the employees, because in many cases, not across the board, but in many cases, a lot of people became very comfortable working remotely, and they've adapted their life to. I'm not saying that this is across the board, but a lot of people like, I can run some errands during the day, or I can do this during the day while I'm quote unquote working. And, there's ethical questions and that arise from that. A lot of it depends on, okay, what are you being paid to do? Is it hour based or time based activities, or is it um, product or service things that are built out? And it's again, it's an ongoing conversation, and we're seeing all kinds of different opinions and flavors amongst this. Ultimately, is collectively, businesses and employees, we all need to come together and go, okay, what can we do to make work a fulfilling experience for all involved, with the end goal to make the best product or service we possibly can for our customers. Because without our customers, we don't have a business. We don't have anything to go on. So we have to make sure that we include the customer experience as a big time backdrop to the decisions we make. And I saw that early on, when everyone was sent home, and they're like, well, we got to do this to make sure that this is taken care of. It's like, of course, you want to make sure that everybody has all the tools and resources they need in order to perform their role that they've been hired to do effectively and efficiently. And yes, we were able to accomplish that quite a bit during the pandemic when everybody was working remotely, because in some cases, it forced the elimination of some silos and
Mhm.
forced people to kind of think about what is our workflow like. And I think that goes back to, the design of your system is you have an amazing grasp of what workflows look like and how they navigate, because a lot of people say, okay, just book a desk. All right, great. Okay, I've got my desk. I'm good. Or, oh, let me do a parking spot. But then the other avenues of, okay, what floor am I working on? What department am I working with? Who else is working there? What other resources do I need for this? And what that does is it creates the opportunity to have a successful experience and being successful at productivity, because you've got all the tools you need to do your job. You get there, you sit down, or if you stand up and you perform the work that you need to do. And I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think a lot of the negativity towards going back to work full time, I think if is a perceived, well, they don't trust us.
Mhm.
And there are elements of that with some types of management. I've seen it, and I always tell them, if you don't trust your people, why are they working for you? But then they tell me, well, I do trust them. It's like, okay, well, there's something else there. about it. So, your experience when you're having these conversations with organizations that are looking to roll out your solution, what are some of those conversations like?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and it's something we observe all over the European market. And I guess it is the same globally. I think the reason for the negativity around flexible work models is usually fear of management to not be able to control their employees, to not oversee all the time and every minute who is doing what. And I think it all comes back to the fact that the pandemic challenged the way companies measured success and measured productivity of their employees. Because back in the day, it was a measure of how many hours did someone spend in the office, how present was somebody. And then we saw all over the pandemic that, okay, people who are working remotely, they're actually doing a good job, and actually our numbers are fine, and maybe we can even do better with providing people flexibility. And so what we need, and especially on a management level, I think we need to develop this shift back from the conservative measurements of company success towards a more cultural oriented and more flexible mindset that allows freedom to everyone, while triggering the relevant success matrices and not hours of presence in the office. And in our conversation with management, what we see is, especially in the in the more traditional companies, in the more conservative companies or industries, so to say, it is very challenging. It is extremely challenging, especially for older management who have been in their positions for the past 20 years, 30 years, to change their mindset and to all of a sudden start to understand that success can also come from, different setups, but just control. And I think what we need, or what most organizations need, is training, is management training, to really shift their mindsets and to develop this trust in their employees and to learn how to manage and steer them and create a work setup that accommodates to their needs while at the same time securing productivity for them.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift for sure. And I think a lot of organizations are, well, this is how we've always done it. But a stat that I share all the time on the show is, over half of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 no longer exist. And these are some of the biggest companies in North America or globally. And over half of them are gone in 25 years. So, and the reason why is, in many cases, they were rigid. They didn't understand the markets. They didn't keep in tune with customer demands, all kinds of different factors. But employee engagement was a component of it as well, because people are like, I don't feel like giving, right? Because I don't feel like I'm being encouraged to create. I'm just going to come in, do my job, and go home, which robs society, quite frankly. People do that as almost, to, get back at the company, but it robs society of innovation, and in like products like yours, it is innovative. It's something new that, and I'm not surprised you built it before the pandemic, because you saw there was a movement for it. I think the pandemic, and I've heard this quote many times, the pandemic basically fast forwarded a lot of work initiatives by about a decade, because a lot of the things that we see now, there was a lot of studies saying, by 2030 or maybe 2035, we might start seeing some of these things in workplaces because of all kinds of different factors. And well, the pandemic went, oh, well, guess what? You're going to do it now. And it forced the hand of a lot of organizations, and they reacted and they made changes. So those executives that, didn't want to change things and didn't want to have remote work, they had no choice in the matter. And now, as we know, I think a lot of people try to relay or rely on past experiences that were successful for them and thinking, okay, it'll work again. But as we've seen, and I see it with the younger generations that are entering the workforce, they demand flexibility. And organizations that aren't flexible will not be able to hire these people because they will not apply there. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
It's exactly the same thing we observe here. I think for young people, or for the younger generation, more than anything, flexibility is key. And according to the latest studies, it's even more important than salary. So companies that are not willing to provide flexibility to the young generation anymore, they don't even appear on their lists of potential companies to apply to. Like they're not even considered anymore. So in our opinion, it's extremely dangerous for companies to deny that trend or to avoid it and try to get around it without considering what people want and what people need. And as the way we work is changing faster and faster, I am more than convinced that it's only those companies that are able to adapt and provide what each moment needs are the ones that are going to be successful.
And those are the companies that won't make that list of big companies that are no longer here in the next 20 years because they're using technology like yours to make things better. So love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, the app, and everything else you've done?
Just go on our website, www.seatti.co. We're also on LinkedIn. You can find us there. We share loads of studies on new work and workplace tendencies there. And we're a Microsoft Teams integrated app, so we're super easy to download and integrate into any organization. And you can find us in the Teams app store as well.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So thank you again for all this amazing work and your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well.